Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Orca Group Series. Today's special guest is Dimitri Sirenko, and you might remember him or have seen his artwork, which is the Fate or Faith one, the absolutely iconic painting of the orca predating on the seal on the beach. I think everyone in this group has seen it and liked anything that it's been shared probably 1,000 times already. And we enjoy seeing it every single time. But I'm going to put you over to Dimitri now, and he'll introduce himself. Thank you very much. Oh, and sorry, Elena. Elena is joining us again here today, and she is the Orca Group expert, as you well know. But okay, so Dimitri, do you want to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Dimitri Sirenko, and I'm the artist behind the painting in question, the Faith and Fate. And I've been an artist all my life, but I've been doing different things over the years. And my latest venture is painting traditionally, which I've done now for 4 years.
Uh, and when we get through this interview, Dimitri, people will have just a better insight of your. I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Dimitri, but before we went into this interview, I looked for video interviews of you. Is this your very first video interview?
Yeah, actually, video, yes. I've done a
Yeah.
lot of interviews for like small news articles and stuff like that, but it was all based on email, answering questions by typing. And so, yeah, actually, I mean, I've had a couple opportunities to do video interviews, but it didn't work out. Like the timing just wasn't right. And but you caught me at the right time.
This I'm honored. Thank you very much for doing it with us, and that's amazing. So what about we throw into the first question? Okay, so Faith and Faith print. Your painting Faith and Faith print depicting an orca hunting a seal on a beach has garnered significant attention with the orca community for its captivating realism. Could you share your inspiration and emotions behind creating this piece? And how would you think it resonates with viewers who hold a deep appreciation for these magnificent creatures?
Yeah, for sure. This painting, it was done in 2019. I was renting a small studio space back then in Vancouver. I lived in Vancouver back then. And I was really, because I lived in Vancouver, I was inspired a lot by ocean, of course. And I was doing a lot of seascapes, but I also had a soft spot for animals. And so I was painting those interchangeably, sometimes even the sea animals as well. And then one morning I got in and for some reason nothing really reminded me of it, but for some reason I remembered watching the documentary about the orcas doing that kind of thing, which is kind of, it's not a regular thing that they do, which is, beaching themselves. And then I did a little bit of research on that and found out that it happens on the Argentinian coast in Patagonia. And I just kind of like start looking into it and right that morning, right, I didn't have much of a plan coming into the studio, and I just kind of like, yeah, you know what, like this inspires me so much. I kind of want to do something like that because and play with a lot of kind of emotion there. And the funny thing is, a lot of my artwork, I do not title it before I paint it. I title it after. I'll finish the painting and then I'll look at it. I'll sit down and look at it, and then I try to have a brief conversation with it in a way. I'll be like, what is your name? Just tell me your name, right? And so after finishing the painting, which is actually interesting too. Like for that painting in particular, I didn't use any particular picture or a snapshot as reference. I kind of looked at a whole variety and then the whole video of the orcas doing that kind of hunting, and then I just wanted to create this a certain composition from my mind in a way, while still taking some elements of realism from the references, and which is why you see in my painting, you don't actually get to see the horizon line, right? So it's like, it's kind of the water just goes all the way to the top. I just wanted, that is actually done on purpose to create that feeling of tension and almost like claustrophobia in a way, because you don't have the open sky to fall back on. So, and it just kind of really focuses you right into the center of the action. So anyway, I decided to paint that, and the funny thing is, like, I'm a fast painter, and I love painting fast. So I finished it that same day, right? That same day I started that whole process. It was just in one day, right? And I was using oil paints, and then yeah, it's like, oh, it's just another painting. And then I at that time I was posting a lot on Reddit as well, like Reddit art groups and stuff. And I just posted on Reddit like I usually do. I would finish a work and then I posted on my social media, on my Facebook, like Dimitri Sirenko art, and then on my Instagram, Dimitri Sirenko. And then I would also do it on Reddit. And then I just, on Reddit, it just went nuts. It just like I didn't expect it, and it just like went on the front page of the Pix subreddit, back when they allowed artwork. You know, it kind of became oversaturated after that, and I understand why they don't want artwork anymore. But yeah, back then you could post art, and it just went crazy. It was like over 100,000 upvotes, and then it just from there took off. It just like, it sold that same day as well, the original painting, and then prints followed right after as well, because I offer my own prints, which I also do in my studio actually. Like, I like to keep everything firsthand. You know, I don't want to outsource too much, because that way I can be a little bit of a control freak and then kind of be responsible for my own quality, you know?
Well,
Yeah.
it is an absolute amazing piece. It is really, really beautiful. I think, like you said there, claustrophobic is one word to put it, but I guess it's almost like you're like a specter where a camera can't actually go, and you're seeing
Right.
this, you're feeling this kind of like emotion for the seal, who's completely unaware of what's going to happen to him. And it's absolutely like Hulk of an orca just coming in and grabbing it, and you can actually just picture what's going to come next, you know.
That's an interesting point that I forgot to mention, that I did play with the proportions. In real life, the orca is not as big, right? But I really wanted to exaggerate that feeling of this impeding doom, or maybe not, you know. And so when I finished that painting, I looked at it, and then I did that whole thing about asking it what its name is, you know. And I thought maybe I could play with some sort of similar words that mean slightly different things, and so faith and fate came up in my mind, and I was like, yeah, that's what it is, because to me it's like, it almost sounded like those two words, they sound like names as well, because they are technically. So it's like, you could relate it to, you could almost say, hey, that's the name of the orca and that's the name of the seal, but we don't know which one is which, you know. And it's like, I leave that up to the people to interpret. And so, and also like that title kind of speaks to the idea what's going to happen, right? We don't know what's going to happen, and that's something I learned from my past experience working with in animation industry and video games as well. And it actually it relates a lot even more to comic books, where it's way more important to show either before or after the action, but never like right on the spot of action. So to show the power of a powerful punch, for example, of a superhero, you'll never see the actual fist connecting to the face. It's usually the follow through or before, right? And that just kind of lets people fill in the blanks and kind of imagine it, and it creates a more dynamic composition where then you're not thinking about it anymore as a still picture that's very static. You're kind of thinking in your head about the whole action of what's going to happen and how it's going to play out.
Wow.
I enjoy that aspect of being an artist, because when I paint, I feel a lot of the same things that you do. I have a whole story of what's going on inside that painting. Every creature has a personality. Every creature has a place and a purpose. And like you said, there's some evidence that maybe not all of those creatures will make it out. I do have one. I do murals more for children, not so much fine art. But I always feel like, even though the technique is not so good, there is a very vivid story being told in all of those. And I love showing my art to people and trying to see what feedback I get back from them, what they think and feel. And I think this is a great opportunity for you to get great feedback too. And you really have gotten amazing feedback. And I'm very proud and happy for you.
Thank you.
Dimitri, you mentioned Reddit. Reddit is the beast of a thing, isn't it? It's so hard. It's so hard to actually get promoted or people to interact with stuff. And so like it just goes to show you the impact that painting has on people. Like, I don't know if anyone has ever posted anything of a promotional kind on Reddit, but it's the most difficult social media to post on or to promote it on. And yeah, it just goes to show you, Dimitri, that it's something special that faith and faith is. And I love the name, one of a spiritual nature and the other one of a kind of a linear time nature, interacting with each other. But like, your artistic journey has been quite diverse, from working in the video game industry and transitioning into fine arts. Can you tell us about the pivotal moment or realization that led you to shift your focus from digital art to traditional media, and how this change has influenced your creative process?
Absolutely. Well, as far as I can remember, I've always been an artist, even as far as I can't remember. If I trust my parents, they'll tell me, hey, you were like 1.5, you're already drawing, right? So it's always been a part of my of me. But as you're growing up, you're using a lot of physical mediums, right? Like you use crayons, then you get into painting and drawing, right? But I lived in Ukraine until I was 14, and we immigrated to Canada. So I still had a good amount of time to live there as well. And I mean, not just Ukraine, but like all over the world, but even in Ukraine especially, being a fine artist is something that no parents would want their child to do. It is because there's this stigma about starving artists and stuff like that, right? And it's even more prevalent in Ukraine, because I remember even as a kid going to this in a downtown, we had this street. It was famous for, it was like a park, a small park within downtown, and then there were just vendors, just artists, fine artists selling their original artwork. Most of them extremely well trained, classically trained in oil painting. And because I guess back in the day, and the USSR had a very strong foundation for traditional painting, right? And so they had all that kind of training. They were all older gentlemen, but they were selling their work for peanuts, right? And because they were all kind of concentrated there, and like it's a very kind of a sad thing to see, and also a very difficult kind of life choice to try to do that in Ukraine at that time, right? And so of course, coming in here into Canada, we felt we need to try to use every opportunity we can get. but I wanted to be smart about it too. I didn't want to. I was still really, really intimidated by the idea of being a fine artist. So I looked towards my other passion, obviously as a kid, you know, video games and cartoons and whatnot. And so I started exploring that even in high school, because when we first came here, I got to go to high school for 3 years. And so there we had one of those AutoCAD classes, but the teacher was really cool. Mr. Cliff, he was actually kind of uh, in with the times, you know, like he actually taught us beyond AutoCAD. He would teach us all the 3D stuff, you know, all the fun stuff, right? He would teach us all the like animation and modeling, texturing, all that kind of stuff. And that really, really inspired me. And I decided that's what I want to do. And so I pursued that. I went to, after high school, I went to Emily Carr University, which is in Vancouver. And I did that classical animation and then media arts major, basically in 3D animation. But the funny thing is, as I was doing it in Emily Carr for 4 years, towards the end, I was kind of narrowing down what I truly want. I started listening more to what I want rather than what I think I should be doing, you know. And then I realized I'm a painter at heart. And so I wasn't really interested so much in the animation aspect of things. Even though I studied it all, I understand it. But I found myself in the last couple of years there learning on my own, outside of school, online, how to do what's called the concept art, right? So it's just like illustrations and concepts for video games of environments and characters and creatures and those kind of things. That truly interested me the most. But, you know, Emily Carr in particular didn't have a program that you could do just doing that, right? It was the closest thing I could get was animation. So that's where I was. When I graduated, it was right around the time it was like a small recession, and it was 2009, and as soon as I graduated, I started applying everywhere naturally. In Vancouver, I was lucky because there was a lot of video game studios and animation studios. So I started applying everywhere, but nothing, like not a single reply, nothing. Then like literally 2 weeks after, I see in the newspaper, oh, there's major layoffs in all these major game companies, like Electronic Arts just laid off 200 people. I was like, oh man, what a great time to graduate, you know. So anyway, long story short, while doing that, I still kept my interest with the concept art, and I kept doing it on a weekly basis. I got a part-time job just doing sales and customer service, just to get some sort of personal income going. My parents were obviously very worried, right, when they saw that it almost took 2 years before I got a first job in the industry. And you know, because they were so worried about where I would be going with this career, I agreed with them. We sat down, we talked about it, and I agreed that, you know what, at 2 year mark, if I don't get a job, I'll probably go back and restudy to do something else, you know, to do something different, something I still might be passionate about, but, you know, not this. And just like literally 2 months before that 2 year mark, I got a contract job offer on one of the forum websites where I was participating in this concept art competitions and stuff. Some other member noticed my art, and he was working in the company in Vancouver. And so he asked, they needed somebody for the project, and they hired me. And that's where it took off. And then I did that for 11 years, you know, working on some big titles. I worked in the game industry, but I worked a lot in mobile game industry. And I shifted away from that because It was extremely the premise of mobile games was a very it was going against my morals in a way where you know they were it's like a gambling machine, you know, like all these mobile games, like when you, especially when you start working as an insider, you realize it's just a casino disguised as a game, you know. And I didn't feel good because I it's like, oh yeah, well, we're happy that we have these what they call whales, people spending like thousands of dollars per month on the game, on the mobile game. But then I thought to myself, well, it doesn't mean they're rich. That just means they're addicted. Who knows what their life is like? And it's like, I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be somebody who is you know, allowing that to happen. So I shifted to animation, right? So in the middle of my career, I went away from mobile games and I went to animation as a concept artist, as somebody like that creates the characters and then they get modeled in 3D-dimensional space and then animated. And my longtime dream in the career was always to become an art director, to be able to have a vision for the whole project, and so I became that in the last 3 years of my career, my digital art career. I became an art director, and anyway, long story short, it ended up being something that I had a certain idealized version in my head of what it would be, and it didn't end up that way, and it became a bit too corporate. It was taking out all the fun out of creative process for me personally. Right now, I'm not saying all the companies are like that, but from my own experience, that's what happened. And I think because I wasn't satisfied creatively, I started kind of looking outside of my job to get that satisfaction. So I started looking into local events, art events, painting on canvas, right? So I just went as a spectator first to some of these competitions and stuff, and that really inspired me. I started painting at home, and actually I saw a huge interest. People were really asking me if it's for sale and stuff, and so I at some point, when my full-time job as an art director became too toxic, I decided to quit, and I quit, and I went back to the very first company that ever hired me in the industry, the one that got me from the forum, and because we were like on the friends kind of level already, and they gave me a part-time job just in case, just to do some concepts for them, while I was actually trying to see if I can do fine art painting as a thing, right? And so months later, I had to quit that part-time job because it took off really fast. And I think a big part of that was that my wife joined me in the efforts, and she's ruthless in terms of promoting my art. She just goes everywhere, and she, you know, because her philosophy is like, the more people see it, the better. You know, that's what it's about. You know, there's a lot of great artists out there, but if nobody sees your art, it's just like, it's almost like it never existed, you know. So yeah, that's kind of like my story. Sorry for rambling on and keep going, but that's
No.
that's how I kind of switched from digital to traditional, and it was a lot of skills and a lot of fundamentals carried over. So it didn't take me too long to get used to the medium, which I did before, right? Like in school, I did traditional. So it was great to come back to that, and so now we've been doing it for 4 years, and my wife is still basically the CEO. I'm the producer.
That's a great combination when you have like a teamwork like that, especially, you know, it makes a big difference.
It does.
You have answered a bunch of questions.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, because that's brilliant, you know. But two things I want to ask you of that last and one is my own personal curiosity, because I love gaming anyway. I got out of gaming because it was ruining gaming for me to know how things were made, and it was taking that immersion away from me. So I went into marketing and business. But can you talk? I know there's some NDAs and stuff, but can you talk about some of the larger titles that you've actually worked on?
Yeah, for sure. I've worked on Halo. I've done some. It was anyone who's familiar with Halo will understand the Halo games. They have the terminals where you can kind of see this backstory and what happened before and what's happening. And so that first company that I worked for, and I worked with them throughout my career, not just that first time when they hired me. Later, I would come back to them every time for more contracts in between other jobs.
That was Bungie, wasn't it? That was Bungie.
No, so it was a subcontracted company. It was a Vancouver
really?
company that was contracted by 343 Industries, and yeah, by the time we were doing it, it was 343 Industries, not Bungie anymore, because that IP was transferred to a different studio, but still under Microsoft, yeah. So yeah, I worked on those, and those terminals. What the company did that I worked for, which they still do, they're getting better at it every year, is create those cutscenes in those terminals, which were done in the style of a parallaxed storybook style, where it's like some things are moving, but it's more like a illustration with some effects like explosion and whatnot, but it's not full on animation, but it's kind of like whimsical in a way. It has its own appeal because it's kind of like all the layers in the background are kind of separated, so you can see a bit of that motion. So we did that multiple times for multiple Halo projects. I worked on My Little Pony, the movie, doing some background line art. And well, even the funnier one, I worked on Sausage Party, that 3D
the Seth
film
Rogen movie.
yeah. I worked on that one as well, doing what is called lighting keys. So what they are is the 2D artists. They will paint maybe like one or two per day, major scenes which determine the lighting. So you have to have really good knowledge of how the lighting works for that, and because you're essentially coming up with the lighting and color, and then you're giving that illustration to the 3D team, and they try to match it in 3D space, right? So then they're trying to set up the lighting the way that you have kind of directed them to. And so I was doing that for the Sausage Party project. And then another title, which I don't know if it's still on Netflix or not, but I art directed second season, because first season was done by a different studio, but second season was art directed by me. It's called Kong King of the Apes. It's a show for kids. It's a 3D animated film. And yeah, so I art directed that whole season. Yeah, so those are some of the titles that I worked on. I mean, I did some remote work for other things like Pathfinder, which is kind of like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
sorry?
It's the great value tabletop.
Yeah. So that's I did a lot of characters for them as well, for their books. Yeah, so there's quite a few titles that some people might know. Yeah.
So would you
amazing artwork. Amazing.
Thank you.
Would you say you're a gamer then, Dimitri, or would you say you're just heavily on the art side of things?
Oh no, 100%. I mean, the whole passion for creating, being part of the game creation was stemmed from being a gamer in the 90s. And like when I was a kid, I mean, I came from a relatively what I would say poor family in Ukraine. We had a bachelor's apartment for three of us, my parents and I, and we didn't have a car or anything like that. So, but you know, my parents tried to make it um, you know, as to do whatever they could, you know, so I could have somewhat of a good childhood, you know, and like they would take me for vacations a lot of times to the Black Sea, Crimea, um, everything budget, right? Everything on budget, but at least, you know, we could say that we were able to do that. And so one of the things was that my dad got into really. He was a gamer as well. We got consoles, like we started with the Nintendo and then Sega and PlayStation and that's like I asked my dad one time, like, how come he was playing at some point more than me, right? And I was like, well, I grew up without a thing like this, right? And he was like, this is so fascinating to me. I really love it, right? So yeah, we played the games together. That was growing up. That was my experience, and that kind of stuck to me quite a bit because even as a kid in Ukraine, I was so inspired by video games that I would create these notebooks, like whole notebooks. I would take them and I'll start drawing weapons and armor,
Yeah.
and I would actually write their stats. You know, like this, how much it
Yeah.
costs, how much damage it does. You
Yeah.
know, those kind of things.
I
So
did the
like,
exact same thing actually. Yeah.
nice, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was so fun, and that's kind of what. And I mean, I've been a gamer. Oh, funny fact actually about my gaming is that my gaming habits is why I have my wife, because I met her on through a video game online.
No way.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I met her through Warcraft actually. Warcraft 3 had this mod called Dota, and it was just basically like a player versus player type of thing. And you could have these things where you could have a clan and stuff. And so yeah, I played that a lot. And eventually like ended up in a clan with a bunch of other random people, and she was part of that too. And ends up that I'm in Vancouver, she's in Calgary. We start talking a lot, and then we met up in real life. Yeah, so that's how things went.
Wow.
That's only like
Congratulations.
right from Vancouver, right? It's only 3 hours about.
uh, well, flight wise, it's only 1.5 hours. Driving, it's like 12 hours.
All
Yeah.
right.
Ooh, 12.
Yeah.
Jesus. It takes you about,
My
you know,
Canadian
maybe
not as strong. It's okay.
it'll take you about 4 maybe to 6 hours to get from one end of Ireland to the top of Ireland. So when the idea of 12 hours in a car is kind of like mind-boggling to Irish people, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, Europe is everything is so tight and close, and Canada is huge, right? It's like this one province is from one province to it's their neighboring provinces, right?
Mm.
With British Columbia and Alberta, but it takes 12 hours to get to certain points. Yeah.
It's crazy.
But you know what? Like, well, that's yeah. So people here are used to those kind of travel times, right? Like, I mean, my brother-in-law, he actually drove from Toronto to Calgary. It took him like 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah,
Jeez.
and a lot of people make that trip. I mean, it can be a fun trip. But going back to the gaming aspect of it, I don't anymore. Not really, because I have three kids, and the only time I do is when they want to play something. Right? When my son wants to play like that Lego Star Wars game or whatever, I'll play that with him. But for my own, I don't really don't really have time or patience for games anymore. When I do have free time, I'd rather I just watch entertainment. You know, I don't really play. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a daughter, and I just have one child, so I can imagine three of them takes up a consider amount of time. But just going back to your story, and I want to know if there was any influences that you brought from Ukraine and that came into your art, that made its way into your art?
Yes. So when I was switching from the digital domain to traditional, my goal there was, if I were to make it my career, the fine art part of it, I wanted to come in ready in a way, or I wanted to learn as fast as I can, right? So that I can get to a certain level that would get me to survive, that would be that my work would become appealing enough that people will actually want to invest into it and into me as an artist. And so I've had a few inspirations in terms of like artists online, just kind of like looking through Instagram, finding people and following them, and really getting inspired by their skill and their work. But a big one that helped me a lot was actually it was a Russian artist who is still doing things right now, but he had a lot of videos online and the videos were of him doing classes for a small group of people and teaching them, and then teaching them the theory and then demonstrating something, and then after they would do their own thing, and he would come up to each one and in a matter of seconds he would show them how to make it really good, then erase it and be like, okay, now you try, right? So this guy was really inspiring to me, because like a lot of things that he said made sense. A lot of things he did were very quick, and that resonated well with me, because I was used to producing art very quickly because of the industry I was in. And so I learned a great deal from him initially, and it was really inspiring to see his level of expertise and his kind of what would you call it, like he's like a jack of all trades, but like in a really good way, so he could do a lot of different things really well. And that kind of also resonated with me, because I guess coming from that digital industry, you're never just doing one thing, right? Every project is completely different. And the more you can adjust to that, as an artist, as a senior lead or art director, the more you can adjust to that in that industry, the better you can do in the long run, as in terms of your career, because you can work in so many variety of styles, and that's valuable, right? And so I think that kind of stuck with me even now when I paint. If anybody checks out my work, they'll see that they can see that it's my work in a certain way, certain things, but there's some things that I do that are like quite different, right? There's some paintings that are extremely colorful and vibrant and abstract almost, and some paintings are more realistic and classical. And I think the realism and classic nature of it comes from my background as well. That kind of classic Russian school of oil painting and stuff, right? Yeah, because another artist that was a big inspiration to me. And the thing is, like, what inspires me, the artists that inspire me the most are kind of the artists that do a similar thing that I want to do in that particular time frame. So, for example, in Vancouver, I did a lot of seascapes, right? And I was mainly inspired by Ivazovsky, right? And his seascapes, like a Russian painter from back in time, right? And he definitely served as a good inspiration for that. Just kind of zooming in and looking at how he did things that are kind of, they're detailed, but you can still see brush strokes. And I mean, that's been my focus with all of my painting, right? I want it to look like a painting, even if that means you only see that when you get up close to it, right? But I wanted to have that quality of brushstroke. I want people to see. I want people to kind of follow my navigation, like where did my hand go? Like I think that's really important in painting. Like if somebody can see where your hand went and imagine it, I think that just kind of that makes it that kind of shows them who you are. The you know, and that's how a lot of artists get recognized. Like no matter what kind of work they do, it's like, oh yeah, I can see what is called a gesture. A gesture is oh, that's Dimitri's gestures, right? That's how he paints, that's his movements. No matter what he paints, what kind of colors he uses, I can see that it's him, you know. So to me, sticking to one thing is not very important. I know some artists are very adamant about, oh, you have to build a brand by only doing this one thing and getting a masterful at it. It's like, well, why not get masterful at several things? And maybe it's too ambitious, but I'm willing to challenge myself that way.
Well, you're clearly a generalist in terms of art, because you've jumped across many different platforms like digital and animation, still, classical, you know. So and it's fantastic. So your focus on the macro and the micro gestures kind of really shines through, and it was really fascinating to hear about your ideology behind that, because the macro style, so that's your signature, is in the micro, but you're saying that you can express that over many different genres, which is amazing. Actually, it doesn't bookcase you, you know, into anything.
Exactly, you know, and my take on that, it was an internal struggle. You know, like when you're going into it, you don't know anything. You don't know how it works. You don't know if there's unspoken rules or anything like that. And some artists think there are unspoken rules, but to me, I did some research and like just searching online, and you find information on both spectrums, and there's no right or wrong. And then I realized to myself, I was like, you know what? If I wanted to be boxed in as an artist, if I wanted to be setting these rules on my own self, like, oh, I can only paint this and I can only paint in this one style, then I would not be a fine artist. I could just have my full-time job working for someone else telling me what to do, right? But in this way, it's like, why would I be an artist? Why would I have my own business, my own kind of career, my own art, if I'm going to be boxing myself in, right? So to me, it's like it doesn't make sense to me personally. So I was like, yeah, you know what? Maybe it's justification, but yeah, that's how I justify why I do different styles, and I can explore, and because I have set myself up this way, the people that follow me and appreciate my art will never, I feel like they'll never be mad at me for changing my style. Whereas I have a few really good friends, really talented artists who have kind of pigeonholed themselves into this one thing they do. And I've talked to one of them recently, and he told me, he opened up to me, he's like, honestly, I feel almost depressed, because it's like I have these major collectors that expect me to do the things that I do now. It's like, but I want to get away from that. But he can't, because he believes he can't, right? He thinks he can. It's kind of, it's all in our head, right? Like, of course you can, but you just have to be prepared to face the consequences of your choices, right? And so I was like, I don't want to face those kind of consequences. So I set myself up as like, oh, well, I'm the guy that can do different things, right? So yeah, it's like I don't want anybody telling me that I have to only be painting seascapes, right? Or just one thing. And so I think that was it was a good choice because I don't know, I don't think I could do the same thing over and over again. I don't think I could.
Three of my very favorite classics artists was Vermeer, Van Gogh, and Da Vinci. And I love the diversity between those three. What do you have any favorite classic artists, and why?
Classic, I would say, well, it kind of changes over time. You know, I don't know if I have one that would stay there forever, like as a favorite. You know, it's always, again, it depends on what I'm kind of where I want to take my own art, I guess. And it changes my perception of other people's art. And it's not that I don't, I like it less or more. It's just like some of them will resonate way better. So lately, I, you know, if we're talking about classic guys, I definitely think the one that I admire, not necessarily that I would want to paint that way, but the one I admire is definitely Sargent, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like I just think what he did was absolutely revolutionary in a way that beats any one of those other classic painters. And again, like I look at it from quite a few different points, right? Like I personally, I look at it differently than other people would, right? Because I have the privilege to be able to look at it from an artist point of view and technique point of view, you know, those kind of things. I can understand that, right? And what goes into it, right? So that's that kind of why, like lately I looked at his paintings again. I was like, man, this is crazy. Like it's so good. And I doubt I can find anybody in this day today that can do better. You know, in terms at least um uh um what do you call it? Objectively speaking, right? Objectively speaking, I that's like close to the top. Like I just don't know how anybody can do better in that kind of painting style, right? And but yeah, no, but like that could change next week. I could be like, oh no, actually I like this guy a lot more. You know?
Yeah.
So but since you asked me, and this is the first thing that came to mind because I just thought about it like a couple weeks ago, right? And I personally, I actually I follow more into living artists because I personally think that while I think there's a lot of respect due to the pioneers of all these art movements and stuff, I still think um, thanks to them actually the level of art today is higher than it was back then. A lot higher because like well and there's many factors to that, right? It's the accessibility of materials, right? The digital aspect of it that you could, if you need to know how to paint a horse, well, you have like billions of images of horses that you can really study from, right? Whereas back in the day, it's like, well, you only have a few options, right? So it's easier, right? But um, just because it's easier to create art today it doesn't mean that these people that can do so good shouldn't be as respected as people from the past, you know, because there's some artists that just do absolutely amazing work, and I definitely I follow them, and the fact that they're living and I might actually be able to talk to them or meet them
Yeah.
in my lifetime, that also is like it brings another level to it, you know.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You know, there's some authors that I love, and I get to talk to them, send them a message off on social media, and a lot of times they reply to you, and it's a great way to kind of you know, just kind of explore the art. I've got one last question for you, Dimitri, and it's to do with the future of art. Okay,
Mhm.
so we have traditional mediums like oils and watercolors and digital art, but you know there could be a time in the future where we see organic pixel, like OLEDs on bendable kind of surfaces, like as bendable as paper or so on, you know. Can you look into a speculative kind of way into the future like that, and kind of give what you would think would be an interesting way of putting art together, melding of old and new?
Well, it's interesting that the technology you mentioned, I actually personally haven't heard of that. So that's something I want to look into, because that sounds pretty interesting. I thought, leading up to the end of your question, I thought you were going to touch on AI a little bit, but I have a lot of thoughts about AI, for example. And if you'd like, I could share my thoughts on that.
Sure, no problem. I mean,
yeah,
I've used AI art
yeah,
in order to make videos about stories I've wrote about Orca, and they can't do it. They just struggle so hard about making Orca. And I'm aware that there's an ethical thing about that. They accumulate an awful lot of examples of art out from other artists and compile that and into an image that they just manufacture. It does serve a big risk to some jobs out there in the artistic field. But again, I don't think there's going to be a great replacement for expressions of art like your ones or other ones like that. I don't think there's much of a risk of the, you know, software being able to replace that certain spirit within the picture. And it's a fantastic tool in terms of being able to manipulate backgrounds and so on, and in other things. But absolutely would love to hear your perspective.
So my perspective, yeah, I mean, a lot of artists got really scared by AI, right? And rightfully so, especially digital artists, right? And the reason I say that as well, kind of AI is not really in competition with traditional medium, because traditional medium is traditional medium. It's just like digital art was never in competition with traditional art, because traditional art is a physical painting, right? Is a physical artwork that offers you another sense other than visual or sound, right? It offers you the sense of touch. Even if you can't touch it, you know you could, right? So that's what a physical artwork offers you. So I never took it as something that could do anything to physical art. And then, okay, yeah, maybe, you know, if they came up with a printer that could print brushstrokes with paint, that and then use AI to create that image first. But then the question is, well, you got to think about it this way. Why would somebody invest so much money into creating that kind of technology? But more importantly, creating that type of technology on an accessible level to everybody, right? Because that's the only time then when you would think that it would actually be scary for traditional artists. It's like if somebody makes it accessible that almost any person can buy it, like a computer, right? They can buy that printer, and then they can generate and just print these paintings that they could put on the walls that have texture and paint and color and everything. But I always say, at least not in my lifetime, I don't think we're gonna see a technology like that on that scale. So that's one thing. To me, it just feels like a little bit like a fad, you know, like the AI art. It's kind of like what do you call it? The unreal reality or whatever it was called. The, you know, the goggles.
Virtual reality.
Virtual reality. It's kind of like it's a fad, you know, like so what? Okay, yeah, they kind of tried to blow it up more than once now. They tried in the 90s, they tried again, and that's exactly what happened. That the cost for technology is not efficient. Like they can't bring it out to such a high level where it would be accessible to everybody, at least not yet, right? Like accessible to everybody and still be very technologically done well, so it wouldn't make you dizzy, these kind of things. So I kind of feel the same way about AI art. First of all, I wouldn't really even call it art, right? It's because art is an expression, and AI is not expressing anything. AI is just learning and spitting something out. It's not an expression. Does AI want to tell us something? No, it's not. People who put in the prompts are expressing something, but the image that comes out is not expressing anything because they didn't create it. They just put the prompts in, right? But anyway, what I think, what I'm excited, I'm actually excited for AI, because if they get it to a really high level, then it kind of eliminates a lot of problems with looking for good references or ideas. Like, I would use it as an advantage. Honestly, I wouldn't be scared of it. I would actually get into it, and I would get inspired by some things, because let's be honest, it does create some interesting color combinations and maybe sometimes even poses. Doesn't mean you have to copy that image that spat out one-to-one, but it could give you certain ideas that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. And I think the most important thing why artists should not be intimidated by AI is because there's one thing about computers, right? Zeros and ones, computers need to have an answer, right? They need to have a yes or a no. What separates us from a computer is that we as humans could say, I don't know, maybe, and that could be the final answer, right? Whereas with a computer, could that be a final answer? I don't know. It's just gonna have to keep trying to calculate something, right? But with a human, it's like we can be content with the idea that something is not finished, or something is imperfect, or something is neither or, and that is something I don't think a computer could understand, or they could try to fake it, but it's not gonna be genuine.
Yeah, what you said there is the AI, the software, doesn't have the imagination. It doesn't have the ability to create. It has the ability to express ideas from humans. And that will change. There will be general artificial intelligence with sentience. But it still won't, replace humans creating art. We've been doing that for millions as long as we've been around. And again, it's going to be a fantastic tool for content creators that, previously went to Fiverr for someone to, mock up something. Those people will be hurt, but they'll adapt. The artists always have to adapt. And the other thing is, you're saying there about moving into art, artists utilizing it. I did hear of some artists who uploaded all of their art into a machine learning thing and said, spew out something similar, use this art references and create something new. And what the computer did was it took all the art and created different references. And I guess an artist can use that or not use that, but like what you said there is, it will work in conjunction with art, but it'll never replace artists.
Yeah, exactly. The way I look at it is kind of like when photography first came about. I think there was a similar kind of shock that people were like, especially for artists, like, oh my God, nobody's gonna want paintings anymore. Now we have this camera that can capture it perfectly. But honestly, like, we're cockroaches of this earth. Like, we adapt so quickly, right? And like, look what we did. Like, now photography is a big part of anybody's creative process, really.
Yeah.
Right. And we learned how to use it to our advantage, right? So that's the way I look at it. I think I'm excited to see what people can do with it. I'm personally, I wouldn't call myself one of those artists that can like kind of spearhead technology in my work, right? I like to be a bit more traditional. I like a bit of risk, like in terms of color use and whatnot. I like trying things, but I'm not a pioneer in a way. So I don't know if I see myself using like that really crazy new technology anytime soon. Maybe at some point, I don't know, right? But I'm excited to see what other people can do with it, you know? And and yeah, and if anything, we can just adapt. Anything that like that happens, it's don't be lazy to adapt, right? Like we've been doing that for like millennia, so we just keep doing that, you know?
I don't
I could
know,
see,
something very particular about getting messy with physical mediums, with oil paints, the way that they smell and the way that they feel and the textures that you put on that page. You can feel everything through the brush. And even though I enjoy digital art, I find that I always come back to physical medium at least once every few projects because I miss working with physical products. And you might
Yeah.
agree. There
Yeah,
is something
exactly.
to it.
Well,
Like
yeah, it
still reading books, not
and
Kindle.
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, but I just it feels old worldy and traditional, and it feels a lot more natural than some of the newer technologies for me. And I've done beautiful things with digital art, but I never feel as much of an artist as I am when I'm working with acrylics and with oils.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes from the idea, like I mentioned earlier, I think that has a lot to do with how many senses we're using to experience something. The more senses you use, the more of a overwhelming experience it can be for you and then for the viewer, like if you're creating something. So like obviously when we're, like you said, when we're working with fine art materials and stuff, there's so much to it. The sense of smell, the sense of touch, and then sound as well. You're doing this on your canvas, you can hear it, right? And that just like that's a completely different experience. I feel like it's able to immerse you so much more. There's a certain disconnect when you're working with just the digital, right? Because all you're really working with is visual, not even sense of touch really, because well, you could have the tablet, right? But I've done that. It's just like you're just kind of like always on the screen. I mean, that's why they even have this like
And then I use my whole body to paint.
yeah, yeah,
And it's
exactly.
vision for art.
you know,
No, that's what I
Dimitri,
like to do, like big motion, right? Because I just think it kind of shows the expression. You kind of uh create an imprint of your own movement, you know?
Dimitri, your particular set of skills, I can imagine if you're where two worlds would mesh together would be augmented reality. So, like say for instance, the line in the background, and you created an animation on digitally of that moving in like as you said after the action, that whoever buys this print could then look at their phone at the next stage of the art. So it comes from the tangible to the intangible worlds. Um, that would be one way I could see you utilizing the digital means, um, and your skill set. But yeah, this interview was fascinating. We've just reached the hour mark, and I'd like to thank you very much for your time doing this interview, Dimitri, and the exclusive of having you the very first video interview that you've done. You're a fantastic and inspirational artist, and I think you're going to be having an inspiration a moment like the people that you mentioned on the younger generation that you influence going forward. So to everyone in the group, I think it's going to be meaningful video and interview to watch, and I'd like to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, the Orca Group, for everything as well. I like I said, it's my first video interview, and that was a really great experience. And I'm really honored that you have spent the time to have come up with some questions for me. And yeah, I really hope that there's some value to this as well for people, whether they're artists or not, you know. And because yeah, after all, like, my goal as an artist as well is try to inspire, right? And yeah, it's a never ending learning journey for me.
Yeah, art is kind of like life, and the way it repeats itself into meaningful experiences. And as an artist, you try to develop meaningful experiences. And
you definitely immortalized that
yeah,
emotion and that picture and that group of orcas. It's a very, very small group of orcas in Patagonia that does that particular hunting tactic, and you immortalize them.
Yeah,
so
that's absolutely that's what really attracted me to that, to that whole idea, is that it's not like all of them do that, right? Like you just mentioned, only a small group, and it's just like that's crazy. That's like just how they adapt to certain environments in certain ways, and yeah, so it's just really fascinating.
yeah, they're specialist hunters, and they have different strategies across the world that they do for different preys, you know. Like we just recently came out with a thing a couple of weeks ago where they actually hunt moose in Canada, supposedly.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yes.
wow.
yeah. So moose will travel across water plains and go into the sea to feed on seaweed, and an orca will see this delicious moose and will just eat it. Yeah.
Well, there is an idea for my next painting.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
done in comic and line drawing, and it's actually a little bit very funny. But I forgot because I get excited. I forgot what I was on about. I'm just excited.
So we'll close out this interview now, and thank you very much, Dimitri. And you know, it was a pleasure. And we'll stay after this video stops, or recording stops, to do some other things. But do you want to just tell everyone what you're doing, where to get you, what's your next projects? Are you going to be doing any more painting battles and winning championships, like the Battle of the Brush and so on? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm again, thank you so much for having me here. And my next steps, I want to explore. I've been doing a lot of acrylic painting, and I just bought $500 worth of oil paint because I want to get back into oil painting. So my next venture will be a certain expansion on my style. It's going to be a bit different, and yeah, you might see some orca at some point, you know. But yeah, that's I'm really excited for this next chapter. Usually summers for me are all about events and kind of performing or competing or doing fairs, right? And then around September is when I'm back to the studio painting a lot more. So I'm really excited for that too. I really want to get back to painting right now. So
So
yeah.
tell people exactly where to find you, Dimitri.
Oh
What's
yeah,
your
for sure.
website?
So
And
Advertise yourself. This is free advertising.
yeah. So Facebook is Dimitri Sirenko Art. It's Dimitri Sirenko Art, and that's my page. And on Instagram, you can find me as well. It's Dimitri Sirenko as one word. And then my website also is actually pretty easy to remember. It's www.dimitri.artist.com. That's my website as well. So,
and you're
yeah.
also on Etsy as well, aren't you, Dimitri?
I am, yes, and it's the same as Facebook on Etsy. It's Dimitri Sirenko Art. Yeah.
Yeah. it's fantastic. I was looking through it and I was like, oh, I'd like this one and this one and this one. So,
Oh,
so
worldwide.
thanks.
So if you have physical galleries going on this summer, feel free to pop on and make a quick video and tell people in Canada that you're doing galleries so they can come.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, because I live in Calgary and we have this thing here that's it's really big. It's called the Calgary Stampede, and it happens every year for 10 days in the summer. And this year was my first year doing that, because there's a whole pavilion for 50 artists that will bring their original artworks and display them and have them for sale. And it was really a privilege to be part of, because the selection process is pretty meticulous, and I got in, and it was my first year, and I'm looking forward to hoping to get in next year again. And so that's definitely the biggest event I'm looking forward to next year.
Wow, cool.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you very much, Dimitri. I hope are you a member of the group? I hope you're a member of the group. But
oh, I have to double check. I assumed I am, but I need to take a look. Yeah.
Please go in there and join. And when this video is getting released, pop it on your social media, and everyone have a look at behind the scenes of this artist that they all love. And yeah, it's a really cool video, I think, and it's a look into your life, which is fascinating, from jumping from Ukraine over to Canada to touching the world with your art. So amazing. Thanks very much again, Dimitri, and thank you, Elena, as always. She's always a great member of the group. So anyway, thanks very much, everybody, and I hope you enjoy this episode.